This is a presentation of the Marine Corps Security Force Company at Naval Air Station Alameda. This is an unofficial history. Please note, this is not a history timeline from the National Archives, Marine Corps History Division, Department of Defense, or Department of the Navy. This is strictly to be an informative presentation of the Marines' duties at Naval Air Station Alameda, told by Marines who are stationed at Marine Corps Security Force Company at Naval Air Station Alameda to preserve our history. Part 1 will be the history of the Marines at Naval Air Station Alameda. This will cover the earliest days when Marines provided base security, also the restricted Alpha area, when it was constructed, special weapons storage, security requirements for special weapons storage areas and transport, and Marine Corps Security Force training at Mare Island. The history of the Marines stationed at Naval Air Station Alameda dates back to when the base opened in 1941. Online searches of when the Marines first arrived, duties in the early years, and when the focus of the Marine Barracks was securing the Alpha area has been limited. The exact history of these events may possibly be buried or stored in large warehouses in the National Archives or Department of Defense. It is believed that in the initial years of Naval Air Station Alameda, the Marines provided the gate entrance security and possibly security for the base. At one time, the unit was called Marine Barracks, Naval Air Station Alameda. In 1987, the command was titled Marine Corps Security Force Company, Naval Air Station Alameda, and the Marines all had to successfully graduate Marine Corps Security Forces training at Mare Island. It is largely believed that since Naval Air Station Alameda has been considered the gateway to the Pacific since World War II, in the post-war years, the base had shifted its mission to the Cold War era. Ample information of the Cold War era is available online and far too vast to cover in this presentation. Likely the beginnings of the Alpha area began in the mid-1960s upon completion of the weapons bunker and the sentry tower, as an addition to the Naval Air Station Alameda Weapons Department. The origins of the restricted area began as an expansion to the Naval Weapons Department. The Alpha area was designed as a weapons storage unit during the Cold War. Between 1964 to 1976, all the structures that made up the Alpha area were constructed and completed. The Special Weapons Magazine bunker and the sentry tower were built in 1964. The Reaction Force building was built in 1976. The Alpha area was known to the Navy staff on base as a special weapons storage area. Marines were on guard posts in the Alpha area, and very limited access was allowed inside the gate. For the Marines of Marine Corps Security Force Company, Naval Air Station Alameda, the security of the Alpha area was their primary mission. The Alpha area required 24-hour fully armed security 365 days of the year. Marines also provided the security during the transport of strategic weapons on base from the air or water vessel to the magazine bunker in the Alpha area. Welcome to Marine Barracks, Mare Island Naval Shipyard. Before we can discuss the Marines' duties in the Alpha area at Alameda, it is essential to cover the training of the Marine Corps Security Forces School at Marine Barracks, Mare Island. This training school is not some average security guard training. Security Forces training prepared infantry-trained Marines to keep strategic weapons out of enemy hands, while the most important safeguard was keeping any of the strategic weapons bunkers silent. An impressive amount of history exists online of Mare Island and the units that served at the shipyard. There are also several pictures of the Marine Barracks at Mare Island throughout the decades. On July 31, 1987, the Marine Barracks Mare Island became the training battalion for the Marine Corps Security Forces Guard. The activation of the Marine Corps Security Forces Battalion was the result of the Secretary of the Navy's plan to strengthen the Navy's ability to deter, detect, and defeat terrorist attacks against personnel, vessels, and installations. Up until the last Marines were trained in 1995, it is relevant to cover the preparation the Marines needed before receiving orders to a Marine Corps Security Force Company command, including Alameda. In general, the Marines and Marine Corps Security Force Training Battalion were very young Marines who recently graduated basic training for 13 weeks, Marine combat training for 4 to 6 weeks, School of Infantry training for 6 weeks, and then Marine Corps Security Force training for 5 to 6 weeks. Up to graduating from the Marine Corps Security Force training, these Marines had been in training for at least 28 to 31 weeks before they had orders to their first duty station. It takes that long before a Marine is eligible to go from no training at all as a civilian to full qualification and keeping national security under proper watch. Those School of Infantry Marines who were enrolled in Security Forces School had to complete a full 24-month Security Forces mission before receiving orders to an infantry unit. Marine Corps Security Force Training Battalion Mare Island was implemented to ensure that Security Force Marines are on alert and can react swiftly to counter-terrorist activities at key naval activities in the Pacific. The training at Mare Island consisted of the following slides. Marines were trained and qualified with the M1911 .45 caliber pistol and were able to wear the Distinguished Pistol Marksman, Sharpshooter, or Expert pin upon graduation. Shotgun training was with a 12-gauge Mossberg shotgun. Alameda did have shotguns in the armory, however there was not a post designated that required a shotgun. Marines were trained in hand-to-hand combat as a means to take control of the enemy and for self-defense. This was not expert martial arts training. That would take hours upon hours and years upon years to master. However, the hand-to-hand combat training was very effective in controlling a hostile situation and detaining an enemy combatant. There is a large selection of close quarters battle training online available for research. The Marines at Mare Island had to practice CQB training until proficient. CQB training was necessary and essential training for Marines who were stationed on naval carriers. The Marines at Mare Island also conducted CQB drills on a decommissioned Navy vessel used for the Marines training. The live tactical course training was modeled like Special Forces and federal law enforcement courses. Perhaps more lo-fi than the course at Quantico, however, the tactics were similar. The classroom was not always the most exciting part of Marine Corps Security Force Training Battalion, but it was necessary to learn about the basics of security forces. Marines learned about restricted area strategic weapon storage areas, alarm control centers, sentry posts, and were required to pass a practical test on classroom subjects. Out of all the field work, range time, and physical training, sometimes the classroom portions were a welcome relief for those Marines. The Personnel Reliability Program. There is a large amount of information available online about the Personnel Reliability Program, or PRP. Any of the Marines at Mare Island who graduated Marine Corps Security Force Company Training Battalion Pacific and were given orders to a unit that stored strategic weapons were required to be PRP eligible. Some Marines who went through Marine Corps Security Force Training Battalion Pacific were known to go to Fleet Anti-Terrorist Security Team Company, also known as Fast Company. There is a great deal of information on Fast Company online. However, Fast Company Pacific Mare Island has been decommissioned, along with the closure of Marine Barracks Mare Island and the eventual closure of Mare Island Naval Shipyard. Part 2 will cover the Marine Corps Security Force Company Naval Air Station Alameda Marine Barracks Command and Headquarters. This will include the administration and commanding officers, including the commanding officer, the executive officer, and the company commander. Also, the senior enlisted, including the company first sergeant and the company gunny, followed by the administration and support staff. The barracks for the Marines were in Building 4, located at the tip of what are now all soccer fields. If facing the mess hall from the street, the Marine Corps Security Force Company was on the right-hand side Pegasus statue. The command consisted of a commanding officer, executive officer, and company commander. Senior enlisted men consisted of a company gunny, a company first sergeant, and each Guard Force platoon had a platoon sergeant. The support command consisted of administration, supply, motor pool, and a housekeeping barracks NCO. Armory and Motor T drivers were all part of the Security Forces Platoon Guard Force. As of final count of the command, Marine Corps Security Force Company, Naval Air Station Alameda had 3 officers and 118 enlisted men. Marine Corps Security Force Company Alameda had 1 commanding officer, They usually held the rank of 04 Major or higher. Alameda was a small enough company that the commanding officer could have the rank of Major. This made the command a pleasure for any Major, as they were able to be the commanding officer at just an 04 rank, yet able to gain experience commanding a unit. Alameda also had an executive officer that was generally an 03 captain. The executive officer assisted the commanding officer in their duties, but also had a more hands-on opportunity with the guard force platoons as well. The Guard Force commander worked directly with the Security Forces Marines and served as the sole platoon commander for all the Guard Force platoons. This was actually the best job out of all the officers in the command. He worked directly with the Guard Force and planned and trained drills for the Alpha area and all field exercises. Alameda also had one first sergeant, who was also active with the Guard Force platoons, but they mostly worked with the headquarters. The company gunny served as the guard chief and worked very close with the platoons. The guard chief was the main liaison between the platoons and the command post. The rank of gunnery sergeant is largely considered one of the most enjoyable enlisted ranks to have in the Marine Corps. The platoon sergeants took charge and essentially managed the respected platoon in their command. As for the Alpha area, the platoon sergeants also held the sergeant of the guard duty, or in the case of Alameda, they could hold the officer of the day, a duty that was only held by officers at larger Marine Corps Security Force Company commands such as Bangor or Kings Bay. The rank was generally reserved for staff sergeants, however it was also held by sergeants. Although the primary mission of Marine Corps Security Force Company Naval Air Station Alameda was the platoons that guarded the Alpha area, there must be a headquarters command to complete the mission. The administrative staff handled everything from records keeping to payroll. The motor pool NCO had a very important role. The reaction force would not be able to do their job in time, or Marines would not be able to continue their field training in Fort Ord without proper functioning transportation. The supply NCO issued everything from Kevlar vests to company PT sweatshirts. And the Barracks and Housekeeping NCO was responsible for the quality of life in the barracks and ensured supplies were well stocked and furnishings were operational. Part 3 will be the introduction to the Guard Force platoons. This is introducing the 3 Guard Force platoons at Alameda, and will include their barracks and living quarters, the gear and supply issued, the peak physical fitness and fitness demands, including that rigorous physical fitness regimen of the Alameda Marine platoons, followed by the roles of the Alameda community. The Marines at Alameda were split into 3 platoons. One of the main reasons was so that there were 3 complete guard platoons to rotate out of the Alpha area. These Marines were required to live in the barracks if they were an E4 and below. E5 and above Marines were eligible to live in Alameda or in a BAQ. The only other Marines that were eligible were married Marines. But regardless if Marines lived in the barracks or lived in the Alameda community, they were required to be in formation each morning. If there was early morning 0500 PT training, all the Marines in the platoon were required to be there in formation. The Marines barracks, then and now, although the classic Alameda enlisted barracks were similar, the Marines were essentially the first 2 or 3 sets of barracks rooms upon the main entrance of the air station. They were held at Building 4 at Wings 20, 19, and 18. Although it is more difficult to distinguish today as the Navy took over all the barracks after the Marines decommissioned and painted everything blue. However, when the Marine Corps Security Force Company at Alameda was active, the doors, railings, and stairs and window entrance trimmings were all painted red. The picture on the left was taken in the 1990s. This shows a rear entrance courtyard section of the Marine Barracks. Notice the red doors and red window trim. The picture on the right is actually the same exact courtyard taken in the year 2017. The Marine living quarters for the most part were on the upper floors of the command. There was a lounge area, a fitness room, payphones all on the top floors, and a pool table and TV room recreation area on the first floor. The rooms of the Marines were also equipped with wall lockers, dresser, foot locker, and bunk. Marines were issued the standard gear of infantrymen. This included a helmet and flak jacket, web gear with canteens and ammo pouches, Alice pack with bag and roller, poncho and liner, shelter half and poles, gas mask and pouch and gloves, and the M16A2 service rifle, but those were stored in the armory. The physical fitness of the Alameda Marines could proudly compete with any of the elite fighting forces in the U.S. military. Enough so that it warrants its own section in this part of history. It was not only essential that the Marines were in elite, well-rounded shape, but with all of the ceremonial and community duties, Marines also had to wear their dress blues and alphas more often than fleet infantry Marines and had to maintain that sharp appearance. It was also the goal of the command of Marine Corps Security Force Company Naval Air Station Alameda to keep their Marines as well-rounded athletes. It was not uncommon for Alameda Marines to be in formation at 0530 for a 3 to 6 mile daily run along the Alameda runway that ran parallel with the estuary. Marines to this day can remember that ocean saltwater fragrance that was very similar to a beached fish. What Alameda lacked in rolling Southern California foothills that infantry Marines in Camp Pendleton tread, they made up for in long PT runs. It was not even unusual to partake in a PT run that went close to 10 miles. Even after such a long run, then getting chow and morning formation, Marines often had more PT to endure during that day. Naval Air Station Alameda was equipped with a full gym to the Marines' blessing. Also, the gym happened to exist right behind the Marine Barracks, so it was very quick to access. Marines often took to the benefits of resistance and weight training to further their athletic ability and strength and power training to complement the increased stamina and cardiovascular training of PT running in the morning. The combination of bench press, squats, and deadlifts to increase strength, and dynamic lifts of power snatch, clean and jerk to increase explosive quickness maximize the Alameda Marines' physical fitness. The Marines at Alameda were also required to learn to swim and use the pool. The lap swimming increased the maximum fitness of the Alameda Marine into a complete athlete. The ability to swim and survive in the ocean was logical since the Marines were stationed in the Bay Area. Water survival swimming was also conducted on a regular basis. Having the convenience of the Naval Air Station Alameda Gym swimming pool at the Marines' back door made swim training a snap. Marines were expected to be able to use offensive hand-to-hand combat in the event of an attack on the Alpha area. Therefore, wrestling and martial arts line training was part of the Alameda Marines training at the Naval Air Station Gym. Marines were held accountable by the command in the event that a Marine used this training while out on liberty or in the community. The command reinforced that this training was only to be used while in training and in the line of duty. Non-judicial punishment may be enforced if line training was used out in the Alameda community. Standard Marine Corps PT body weight and PFT training was also conducted daily. By the time the company decommissioned in 1992, nearly all those Marines were able to achieve 80 sit-ups in 60 seconds and 20 pull-ups. A strong percentage could also run the 3-mile run in under 18 minutes, giving the Alameda Marines a high number of perfect 300 PFT score Marines. Alameda Marines in the community. The Marines in Alameda were expected to partake in local community events, including parades, church services, mentoring, senior citizen activities, ceremonies, funeral services, and many more. Another reason the Alameda Marines were required to maintain a high level of physical fitness was for the many full dress and duty dress uniform inspections conducted frequently. With all of the community events, the Alameda Marines were responsible for attending. A trim waistline appearance and spotless uniforms were demanded. The Marine Corps Birthday Ball. An integral requirement that the command acknowledge with the Marines at Alameda was a celebration of the Marine Corps birthday. The command made certain that Marines attended the Marine Corps Ball and that it was mandatory that all Marines that were not on duty attend. Many of the Guard Force Marines were young and mostly only a few years out of high school, so exposure to formal events were often very limited at their young age. By attending the Marine Corps Ball, these young Marines learned the importance of a neat appearance and dress at formal events by wearing their dress blues at the Alameda Marine Corps Ball. Also, how to conduct themselves properly at formal events and ceremonies, and to show respect for history, their fellow Marines, and any guests by utilizing proper Marine Corps etiquette. Ironically, many fleet infantry commands did not have a requirement for their Marines to attend the annual Marine Corps Ball. But the fact that the command at Naval Air Station Alameda did, in hindsight, displayed how much care and effort the commanding officers and senior enlisted NCOs put into their Marines. Being a Marine at Marine Corps Security Force Company Naval Air Station Alameda was not only about making the Marines into a physically fit, expertly trained, knowledgeable, and disciplined guard force, it was also about learning to be a well-rounded, respectful, and honorable person. Hoorah! Part 4 will cover the restricted Alpha area and duties of the Marine Corps Security Force Company. This will include introduction and layout of the Alpha area to include structures inside the Alpha area, perimeter runway fences, the alarm control, and lighting. Also covered is the magazine bunker and Marines on duty in the reaction force facility. Also the Corporal of the Guard and Alpha area posts, including the Corporal of the Guard, the Gate Sentry, the Tower Sentry, the Roving Sentry, and any extra sentries. Also the backup force and alarm control to include the Secondary Alarm Control Center and Assistant, the Quarterdeck Sentry, the First Responder, the Armory and Drivers, and the backup force teams. Also covered will be the Alpha area drills and attack scenarios, and strategic weapons transport. The Alpha area was the entire purpose of the Marines' existence at Alameda, or at least after the Marines were relieved of base and gate entrance security. The sole purpose of this area was for this 7-magazine special weapons bunker. Now PRP was mentioned earlier, but did not just apply to Marines. PRP applied to every single individual who was allowed entry into the Alpha area. Everyone from electricians that had to maintain the alarm controls, landscapers that had to mow the height of the grass and all the vegetation eliminated, all the way to the cooks who shipped vac cans from the base mess hall to the Marines and the reaction force facility. The facilities in the Navy that stored special weapons all had to have the same requirements. As you can see by the photo, there is a double-fenced area with a runway space between. This was an alarm control system that detected motion. This alarm system was quite sensitive and could catch rapid motion, even flying debris. The perimeter alarm system was the first point of defense for the Alpha area. Perimeter fence runway requirements. As you can see by the number of lights in the picture, the Alpha area perimeter was required to have ample lighting during the nighttime hours. Along with the perimeter lighting, the front of the doors of the magazine bunkers were also required to be visible at nighttime. Although the years of neglect have allowed weeds and other vegetation to freely grow unkempt in the Alpha area, during the active years, all grass and vegetation had to be mowed to a very low height. In fact, the perimeter fence runway could have no interfering vegetation and was maintained very regularly. By the 1960s, the Navy began expanding the weapons area to meet growing demands. This weapons magazine area was originally developed and used by the Advanced Underseas Weapons Shop, part of the Ordnance Department. A magazine bunker constructed in 1964 signaled a second phase of the weapons department development. The magazine bunker had 7 storage units that housed strategic weapons. The next set of alarms was on the actual magazine bunker itself. The top part of the bunker was not affected, as roving sentries could even walk on top of the magazines and not trigger any alarm. The doors, however, were heavily alarmed, and so was each magazine room inside with a motion sensor alarm. An alarm triggered by the door required the reaction force team to deploy and conduct a thorough external sweep until the corporal of the guard determined that there was no threat. Alarm inside the magazine did require both the reaction force and backup force teams to deploy, as well as any Navy personnel who could access the bunker to determine the cause of the alarm. Just as the entire Alpha area, the magazine bunker was not allowed to have any vegetation growing. The obvious years of neglect have spawned upon a series of weeds and vegetation, but during its commission years, the magazine was also kept free of debris and was well lit during the night hours. The Alpha Area Reaction Force Facility. The Reaction Force Facility building was constructed in 1976 and was the last addition to complete the Alpha area, providing physical security. A very similar structure also exists at North Island Naval Air Station in San Diego. The Reaction Force Facility is where Marines on duty in the Alpha area were housed between sentry reliefs. These Marines were considered to be on the front line and were not allowed to leave the Reaction Force Facility until they were properly relieved. Since there were 3 platoons that made up the guard force, 1 platoon would be on duty, then off duty to the headquarters area for 1 to 2 weeks before returning to post again. For instance, if 1st Platoon was on guard duty, they would occupy the sentry posts in the Alpha area and the backup force, while also on standby occupying the Reaction Force Facility. 1st Platoon would carry the guard force duty for 1 full week. 2nd and 3rd Platoon during this time would either have classroom and physical fitness training or have infantry training at Fort Ord. At week's end, 2nd Platoon would relieve 1st Platoon from guard force duty, and 2nd Platoon remained on post for 1 week. Then 3rd Platoon would relieve 2nd Platoon after 1 week, and so forth. Since cameras were prohibited inside the Alpha area, finding photos of the Reaction Force Facility and Alpha area during its active years are impossible to find. However, the half circle in the front door made of brick and mortar served as a blast shield deflector. A camera was placed outside the entrance to identify incoming Marines before they were allowed into the RFF. The Alpha Area Tower and Gate Post. The last 2 structures in the Alpha area were the Gate Sentry and Tower. Gate Sentry shack pictured below is the least identifiable, but the tower is perhaps the most prominent and obvious Alpha area structure. Still standing tall after all the years the base and Alpha area have been closed. Marine Corps Security Force Company posts in the Alpha area. The Alpha area posts for the Marines covered all security elements to guard the strategic weapons bunker. The primary posts were as follows: the Corporal of the Guard, the Gate Sentry, the Tower Sentry, and the roving sentry. The Marines in the Alpha area covered 24-hour security. There were enough Marines in the Alpha area for each to cover 2 shifts of 4-hour periods. As an example, if a Marine was on tower sentry post, he would serve 4 hours on post, then be relieved for 8 hours, and then return on post for 4 hours, and so forth. In the 8 hours the Marines were not on shift, they were on standby in the reaction force facility. The Corporal of the Guard was in charge of all the Marines in the reaction force facility, as well as the sentries that were all on shift. The Corporal of the Guard shift. The Corporal of the Guard was in charge of all the shifts in the Alpha area, and they were also responsible for posting and relieving all sentry posts. It was also the Corporal of the Guard that assured that all sentries were engaged in their duties, and they would also conduct regular status reports. If there was an alarm in the Alpha area perimeter, it was required by the Corporal of the Guard to record it in the duty logbook. The Corporal of the Guard stood post in the reaction force facility, and they were also in charge of all the Marines in the reaction force facility. Since quite some time has passed, the Corporal of the Guard was at least believed to be armed with the M16A2 service rifle, but also perhaps an M1911 pistol or even the 9mm Beretta. The Gate Sentry Post. The Gate Sentry was in control of access to the Alpha area. Not only did they control the rolling gate for vehicles to come in, but also the walk-in gate. All incoming personnel were required to identify themselves with the Gate Sentry. If there was any question about incoming vehicles or personnel, the Gate Sentry would report to the Corporal of the Guard. The Tower Sentry Post. Tower Sentry Post could see the entire Alpha area, with the exception of just a few blind spots. The Tower Sentry was equipped with his M16A2 service rifle and also a radio. The tower also had a perimeter alarm console and a spotlight to examine any alarm triggers during the night hours. The Tower Sentry was responsible for reporting the status of any perimeter or bunker alarms to the Corporal of the Guard. An example of a status report might be as follows. Guard Force, this is Tower. My position is in sight of the alarm. Cause of the alarm is wildlife. There is no threat at the alarm site. Regardless of how common or trivial the cause of the alarm, the Corporal of the Guard was required to record the alarm trip in the logbook. On a side note, not many areas at the time received a better view of the Bay Area Bridge and the city of San Francisco landscape than that Alpha area Tower Sentry. The sight during the evening was especially surreal from the bridge and the city building lights. This incredibly beautiful image is embedded in the memories of the select few who served in the tower, and that memory will be there until their final day on Earth. The Roving Sentry Post. There were indeed blind spots in the Alpha area, most notably at the east end of the magazine bunker and behind the reaction force facility. Because neither the tower or Gate Sentry could see those areas, a roving sentry had to physically cover those areas. Oftentimes, the roving sentry even had to assess any cause of alarm and be right at the alarm site. For example, if a fence alarm was constantly being triggered, the roving sentry might notice that a tall weed is causing the alarm. The corporal of the guard would then notify Navy maintenance staff in order so that any vegetation or debris could be removed. Additional sentry posts as determined by the corporal of the guard. If there was an alarm trigger from any magazine bunker, that would require the reaction force facility and backup force team to deploy. In the event that an alarm was malfunctioning or not working at all, the corporal of the guard might be required to designate a sentry by the magazine bunker. Until Navy's technical staff could repair the alarm to proper function, that sentry had to stay there until the corporal of the guard had relieved them from duty. The Reaction Force Facility Part 1, their mission. The main mission of the Reaction Force Facility was not just to be on standby housing when Marines were off post. The primary mission was to have Marines on standby for immediate response to any threat at all to the Alpha area. Marines that were on duty in the Reaction Force Facility were occupying the Alpha area 24 hours a day. In the case of an attack, those Marines were the first to respond and defend the Alpha area. Inside the Reaction Force Facility. Now, not very many people have seen the inside of that Reaction Force Facility, and even fewer have seen the inside of the Reaction Force Facility during active years. But like most mysteries, it turns out to be pretty ordinary. The Reaction Force Facility had a small kitchen and a dining area, a recreation area, and a foosball table with a weightlifting bench and a TV lounge area. As a matter of fact, amongst those Marines, the foosball tournaments in the Reaction Force Facility were proven to be legendary. The Marines would sleep in the berthing area. This is a naval term for the area that sailors and troops slumbered on a ship. There was a small kitchen with a refrigerator and a microwave oven for Marines to prepare any snacks. However, the chow hall would prepare meals for the Marines in the general mess and deliver hot chow to those Alpha area Marines in field back cans. Reaction Force Facility gear and weapon staging and drills. While Marines either slumbered or engaged in other activities in the Reaction Force Facility, their gear was tactically staged with their service rifle. It was staged along the wall that was leading up to the roof hatch. Drills were conducted on a regular basis by the Sergeant of the Guard or the officer on duty. Reaction Force Facility Rooftop Defense. When Marines were on a drill or perhaps an actual attack, the Reaction Force Facility team that was responsible for initiating defensive fire to suppress the attackers fired their weapons through the firing ports. Oftentimes that middle firing port was used for the M60 heavy gun.
During a drill, one of the Reaction Force Facility teams would deploy to the rooftop by the top hatch. Marines would get in position at the firing portholes to simulate engaging the enemy. The Reaction Force Facility team responsible for covering the Reaction Force Facility rooftop firing ports followed suit and got in position.
The backup force. The primary mission of the backup force was to remain on standby in the event of an attack and deploy to the Alpha area to neutralize any threat. During an attack on the Alpha area, the Marines in the Reaction Force facility would hold a defensive position. The backup force teams would deploy outside the Alpha area perimeter in a position at a tactical advantage. The backup force team would sweep the area after a drill to ensure that the area was completely secure. Now, if it was an actual attack, the backup force team would sweep to neutralize any threat. In addition to primarily providing backup defense, the backup force team also held sentry positions in the Marine Corps Security Force Company Command Center and were posted by the non-commissioned officer in charge. The main duty was still the Alpha area security, and the Corporal of the Guard on duty was still primarily in charge of everything, including the backup force. Cameras and recording devices were also prohibited in the backup force during the active years, so very few photos exist of the interior backup force area. Any photos that do exist, their locations are unknown. Quick summary of the backup force team and mission. The Marines in the backup force were staged in the backup force command area and were considered to be on post or on duty. The backup force Marines were required to sleep in the backup force berthing area and were required to respond to a drill or attack in under 10 minutes. What that means is that the backup force had to be deployed to the Alpha area and in fighting position within that 10-minute timeline. 2 sets of backup force teams deployed to the Alpha area during drills or even an attack. They would deploy in the light armored vehicles, and they would have an M60 on the top turret to lay down any suppression fire. Any Marines that went out of the backup force area, even to go to chow, had to take a radio. The radio was in case of a drill or an attack, those Marines had to stop what they were doing and get directly back to the backup force area. In the backup force area, they would get fully donned with their weapon, flak jacket, web gear, helmet, and gas mask to deploy to the Alpha area. Since the Marines in the backup force were considered to be on post, several posts were designated in the command area. Those posts included the alarm post sentry, the quarterdeck sentry, the first responder, and armory and react vehicle drivers. The Alarm Control Center. The secondary alarm control sentry was considered to be a senior post. Ideally, a non-commissioned officer was supposed to cover that shift. The assistant secondary alarm control sentry was a junior post, and any Marine of any rank could cover that position. They were also known as the SAC and the ASAC. Essentially, this was the command post for the backup force, and the SAC and the ASAC had to monitor the alarm control console and reciprocate communication between the Corporal of the Guard and the backup force. The Alarm Control Center was located in Wing 20 of the Marine Barracks at the time. The secondary alarm control post received alarms from the Alpha area and also stored vital things such as radios and ammunition. The secondary alarm control center was located in a large booth area that was behind heavy glass with heavy doors that locked magnetically. SAC not only controlled the entry into the SAC area, but also to the large hatch pictured on the right. Marines were required to show ID into the SAC area, and other than the guard commander or guard chief, no one that was not on shift or unauthorized was allowed to enter the SAC area. The quarterdeck sentry. Located at the entrance of the Marine Barracks, the quarterdeck sentry checked in all visitors to the Marine Barracks. Any visitor not part of the Marine Corps Security Force Company had to show ID and sign in the log entry. They were also the sentry to answer the phone with the very unforgettable line. Be advised, this is unsecured line, Marine Corps Security Force Company, Naval Air Station Alameda. PFC McAlifat speaking. How can I help you, sir or ma'am? Naturally, young Marines had to test themselves, mostly for their own personal humor and entertainment, on how fast they could say the line whenever the phone rang. The Duty Rover. The Duty Rover simply roved the backup force area and command area and the Marine barracks and administrative areas for security. You could tell they were the rover on duty because they wore their cover and a duty belt and a radio. The First Response NCO. Very similar to the Corporal of the Guard, the first responder was the in charge of the backup force. The first responder also held most of the office keys to the barracks rooms and the administrative areas. Although the first responder, of course, spent most of his time unlocking barracks doors for Marines who couldn't find a key to their room. The first responder was also generally designated as an E4 post if there was an NCO available. Armory and backup force vehicle drivers. Armory sentries were armed with either a 9mm or a .45 caliber pistol. Only the armory sentry was allowed into the armory. They issued and tracked all firearms to Marines and had the advantage of not having to have any other backup force sentry post or even deploying to the Alpha area. The light armored vehicle drivers operated the vehicles and safely drove a backup force team of Marines to the Alpha area. They had to be licensed to operate the armored vehicles. These vehicles could only travel to another part of the base for fueling and maintenance. The armored vehicles at no time could leave the Naval Air Station Alameda base at all. Backup force team vehicles and the location. The photos below were taken in the year 2017. And it was the location of the Marine Corps Security Force Company motor pool during the active years. Fascinatingly, this garage or sheltered area for the Marine Barracks was constructed way back in 1938 and was intended to be a flimsy temporary storage area. Yet 80 years later, it still stands strong. The gated sentry was where the light armored react vehicles were housed. The rest of the Alameda Marines vehicles were also staged here. Drill and attack scenarios. A drill was a simulated attack or threat to the Alpha area. Drill scenarios were essential to practice on a frequent basis in order for the Marines on duty to react swiftly and confidently to take a defensive position. It was also essential that drills were random and unpredictable, as any attack is upon surprise, so the reaction force facility and backup force teams had to be ready. During the training weeks when the Marines were not on post, the classroom time was essentially dedicated to cover attack scenarios and deployment of the reaction force facility and backup force teams. The company commander would design drills and scenarios, while the officer of the day or sergeant of the guard would command the team's defense positions, followed by the corporal of the guard. Drill planning and preparation. The company commander planned out Alpha area drills and scenarios to simulate actual terrorist attack. Drills were not an event to be taken lightly or as any kind of method of disciplining Marines' behavior. The company commander had to authorize drills for the purpose of defense of an attack. Drills had to be recorded in the logbook and with compliance of headquarters regulation. Since live ammunition was also utilized during drills, it was essential that all drills were conducted under compliance of base operating procedures. It was also essential to have all personnel and roads clear as the backup force teams deployed during drills. The drills and scenarios were then covered during training weeks. The drill scenarios included the area of attack, the communication between the sentries on post and the corporal of the guard, the communication between the corporal of the guard and the reaction force facility and the backup force teams. The officer of the day or sergeant of the guard would coordinate positions for the reaction force facility teams, the backup force teams positioning in enemy neutralization, the field of fire and avoiding friendly fire, finally sweeping the area and securing the Alpha area. Point of attack. The point of attack is where the enemy is on an offensive attack to the Alpha area. The fencing perimeter was alarmed in sectors, which was displayed on the alarm control consoles when the alarm was tripped. Out of the thousands of scenarios that could be produced, Marines in the reaction force facility and backup force had to be prepared for an attack in the day or night with the goal of neutralizing the attacker as rapidly as possible. Sentry communication. The sentry who views the attack will report to the status and location of the corporal of the guard and be the eyes of the Alpha area. This is an example of a radio communication that might sound from the tower sentry. Guard force, this is tower. Perimeter sector 15 is under attack. Be advised, 10 to 15 armed enemy attackers with automatic rifles and transport vehicles are at sector 15. The corporal of the guard and the reaction force facility are the first responders to an attack. The reaction force facility team went to cover the rooftop will supply any cover or suppression fire. If needed, a second reaction force facility team might engage the attackers on a ground level. The corporal of the guard will remain in command of the Alpha area and reaction force facility teams, and also be the communication lead to advise any positioning backup force team. Backup force team and response. backup force team's sole purpose was to provide support to the reaction force facility and Alpha area by remaining on standby in high alert in case of an attack. The initial response to the Alpha area comes through the SAC area. During the drill, the alarms in the backup force area would sound off, alerting Marines to don their helmet and flak gear and stand by in the briefing area for deployment to the Alpha area. In general, the backup force team need to be to the limit area in no longer than 10 minutes. Backup force team and response. The backup force team of 2 light armored vehicles were loaded with Marines and their rifles and ammunition to deploy to the Alpha area. The vehicle had the driver as well as the team lead in the front seats. The top turret for the M60 gunner was employed, in which they would supply suppression fire. It should be noted that during drills, the Marines that were on post in the backup force, which includes the SAC and ASAC, the quarterdeck sentry, and also the roving sentry, did not leave their post for drills. The armory sentry, in fact, did not leave the backup force area at all. Upon arrival at the Alpha area, the backup force team would be advised by the officer of the day or sergeant of the guard or even corporal of the guard of their position that they needed to deploy in. They also had to take the route to the Alpha area so that they are not receiving any friendly fire as well. Sometimes that meant driving around the entire Alpha area in order to get in position. Drill recap. Upon completion of the drill, the officer of the day or sergeant of the guard would recap the backup force and reaction force teams. This was the cover of what both teams did correct and what needs to be improved. A recap may sound like this. For the tower sentry, outstanding job in keeping the corporal of the guard and the entire Alpha area of what the enemy was up to. But you do need to be better at communicating the sector of where they're at. For the backup force teams, you guys deployed excellent to the rooftop and in position with good timing. But every Marine needs to be wearing a helmet and flak jacket. No soft covers are allowed on drills, an attack, or anything. The backup force teams. You guys arrived in great position and were also swept the area properly. But the backup force team is required to get out there in 10 minutes, and you guys took nearly 15 minutes to get out there. Unacceptable. We need to improve that. Each drill then need to be entered into the logbook, including the times and description of the drill.
Here the enemy engages an attack on the gate post. The reaction force facility team will deploy to the rooftop and apply a defensive fire. Buck team will deploy to a flank position and then apply fire to the enemy. The arrows show that the field of fire is only on the enemy. There is no friendly crossfire. This drill scenario is a direct attack to the bunker doors. Here the enemy engages by the fence facing the bunker. The reaction force facility deploys and takes a prone position on top of the bunker. The backup force teams this time will flank the enemy on both sides. Both backup force teams and the reaction force facility teams are positioned so that all fire is engaged only on the enemy. This drill scenario is an attack on the reaction force facility from a vessel coming from the estuary. Here the enemy engages fire directly to the reaction force facility. The alarm has sounded, and the RFF teams take a defensive stance on the reaction force facility. The backup force teams deploy. Here, one backup force team engages the enemy, and one backup force team fires upon the vessel. All Marines are positioned so the field of fire is only on the enemy.
Strategic weapons transport. Although significant time has passed, and it would be nearly challenging to identify and contact any Cold War era Navy and Marine that conducted an actual strategic weapons transport to and from the Alpha area, it's theorized that tight security would be vital. Similar to all naval weapons bases, while strategic weapons were in transport and unsecured, weapons transport generally requires tight security at 3 points: the unload site, in transport, and the storage site. It's theorized that Marines of the Guard Force would provide a tight security perimeter at the unload site, as well as surrounding the Alpha area. The light armored vehicles likely traveled in a convoy to provide security. According to a story from the Building 43 winery on Alameda Point, a Navy veteran who was stationed at the Naval Air Station Alameda Weapons Department from 1967 to 1969 had stated this: "The Alpha area was heavily guarded by the Marine Barracks. We temporarily stored special weapons there, Concord Naval Weapons Station, and the fleet." And Colonel Larry Williams also
Part 5 will cover the field training at Fort Ord for the Alameda Marines. This will cover rifle and pistol qualification and range familiarization fire, infantry rifleman training, and mount training. Although the Marines at Alameda for the most part held the MOS billet 8152 Security Forces during their time at Naval Air Station Alameda, their primary MOS was one of the following 0300 infantry fields: 0311 Infantry Rifleman, 0331 Infantry Machine Gunner, 0341 Infantry Mortarman, 0351 Infantry Assaultman. Keeping up on infantry training was essential at Marine Corps Security Force Company, Naval Air Station Alameda, as it was required training and Marines would be able to retain the training for a smooth transition back into the Fleet Marine Force once their 24-month Security Forces duty was satisfied. Since many of the Marines who completed their Security Forces tour were in the Marine Corps for over 2.5 years, many would be earning the rank of corporal soon enough and be assigned to team lead billets in the Fleet Marine Force. This additional infantry training at the legendary Fort Ord would keep infantry Marines on task with infantry assignments for a steady transition to a leadership position to an infantry unit in the Fleet Marine Force. Marines are required to qualify at the rifle range once a year. The Marines stationed at Naval Air Station Alameda would travel to Fort Ord Army Base at Fort Ord, California for rifle qualification. The Marines had the privilege of qualifying on Fort Ord's legendary Range 8. Not too many rifle ranges that the Marines fired at overlooked a beautiful ocean horizon like the one in Monterey Bay. The Marines at Naval Air Station Alameda also continued their field training at Fort Ord Army Base. Marines conducted patrol routes, fire team missions, combat tactics and scenarios, and perimeter security and virtually all aspects of 0311 training. Marines held military operations and urban terrain training at Fort Ord's legendary Impossible City. This training is a continuation of the Mount and CQB training the Marines and Marine Corps Security Force Company School conducted. Room clearing, stack formations, and rooftop drills were performed here. Camp Pendleton later had their own state-of-the-art urban training facility. However, the Impossible City is still held in high regard and has several online website information sites even 20 years after its final use.
The official decommission of the Marine Corps Security Force Company of Naval Air Station Alameda, California. In the fall of 1992, the Marine Barracks / Marine Corps Security Force Company, Naval Air Station Alameda, California had decommissioned. A parade ceremony ensued in the front courtyard that is now soccer fields. The Marines went out looking sharp in a full dress blues closing ceremony. Over 50 years of history at Naval Air Station Alameda had come to an end. The inevitable was going to happen as the entire Naval Air Station Alameda base closed in 1997. Historically, this was a result of the 1993 Base Realignment and Closure Commission. When the Navy took over the Marine Corps Security Force Company Command, barely anything was left of the Marines' presence. The trim and doors that were painted red were later painted blue, and all the signage and markings were removed. Amazingly, the Alpha area stands alone in the condition that it was nearly left in, as of 2017. Since this area was not accessible when the Naval Air Station was turned over to the city of Alameda, no vandalism is present. Other than an overgrowth of vegetation, it's still easily identifiable to any Marine, sailor, or civilian that served when active. Some online forums are active with Marines who are stationed at Naval Air Station Alameda. Whether those Marines served 4 years in the Corps or retired with over 20 years of service, they nearly all say that Marine Corps Security Force Company, Naval Air Station Alameda, was one of their favorite duty stations. Preserving and passing on our history as Marines at Naval Air Station Alameda. Don't let our history die with us as time passes. Attention all Marines. If you have any personal stories you'd like to share, please contact the staff at the Alameda Naval Air Museum. There is plenty of history at the Museum of the Navy, but almost none of the Marine Barracks or Marine Corps Security Force Company. Just remember that history that is not recorded never happened. It will only die with the memories of those who served at Alameda. So realize there is no wrong, only right that you can share. Alameda Naval Air Museum has the copy of this PowerPoint presentation to share with the public. And if any changes need to be submitted, please do so. We just ask to please respectfully and professionally submit any changes.
We're dedicated. We're dedicated. Ha, 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 ha. Yeah, ha, yeah, ha. Everywhere we go. Everywhere we go. People want to know. People want to know who we are. Who we are. Where we come from. Where we come from. We come from an island. We come from an island. A motivated island. A motivated island. We come from an island. We come from an island. Motivated island. A motivated island. They call that island. They call that island. Paris Island. Paris Island. They call that island. They call that island. Paris Island. Paris Island. It ain't like the army. It ain't like the army. At Fort Jackson. At Fort Jackson. It ain't like the Navy. It ain't like the Navy. Down in Florida. Down in Florida. It ain't no flyboy. It ain't no flyboy. Over in Texas. Over in Texas. Whoa, whoa.